Okay, and recording has started, so welcome everyone. I see we have upwards around 30 participants today, which is great. It's a great turnout. Today we are going to cover a tool that everyone has available to them in their Microsoft Productivity Suite. It's called Power BI. Keith had asked me earlier, what does BI stand for? It means business intelligence. So you will see that acronym. It's kind of one of those, like I like to call it like a flavor of the month acronym. Like you'll hear people, string together like, hey, let's see some KPIs about the BI. That's what they're talking about, key performance indicators about business intelligence. Essentially, it's a tool that allows us to model and visualize data. So our learning objectives today are going to be describe what Power BI is and what it can be used for. We want to understand how to access the Power BI application. I'm going to show you how to make sure you have it installed. Create visual presentations of data and publish visuals to the Power BI site. That's part of our Microsoft 365 suite of sites, and we'll take a look at that. And then we're going to show you how to share visualized data with others. Now, I will tell you, if you are a seasoned Power BI user, this is probably not a great class for you because you're going to be really bored with this because we're going to cover a lot of stuff at a high level, but we are going to do some data modeling and we are going to produce some visuals and we're going to publish those. So I'll show you how to do all that. But let's talk about what Power BI is, and this is Microsoft definition. So Power BI is a unified, scalable platform for self-service and enterprise business intelligence. It offers you the opportunity to connect and to visualize any data and seamlessly infuse the visuals into the apps you use every day. What does that mean in English, right? It's a way to create visual representations of data, and you could drop it into a Word document. You could drop it into a PowerPoint. You could have it live on a PowerPoint. You could share it with people over the internet and say, hey, check out this great graphic. We could publish it to websites. We can even use data that's published on websites in our Power BI. And I'm going to show you how to do that. It's a cool trick. So where do you find Power BI? It's part of Microsoft's Power Platform. So for today's example, I'm going to use the Power BI desktop app. And again, this training will be available on the internet for on demand. So if you want to, at a later time, get yourself set up and then follow along with this like a tutorial, that would be great. You could certainly do that. I've kind of pasted out so that it follows like a step-by-step tutorial for you. It's included with our Microsoft 365 subscription, so everyone has access to this. It's not something you need a special license for. And the good news is to install the desktop application, you don't need any special permissions on your computer. Because we have the Office 365 Government Suite, you can pull this application down and use it. The reason why I'm using the desktop app over what's available on the cloud is it's easier to use. Quite frankly, the desktop app is much easier to use. Two, it kind of packages things nicely for you in a way that you're familiar to see, right? So it kind of has that Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word tool ribbon kind of flavor going on about it that makes it a little more intuitive, I think. And we'll look at that, and you can see why here as we go on. But to start today, to download this application to your computer, you're going to go to the Microsoft Store. Everyone here has access to the Microsoft Store. Please don't try and download TikTok from the Microsoft Store. It will set off all kinds of alarms that I do not want to deal with. So if you go to the Microsoft Store, you can see I've just typed in Microsoft Store in my search bar on the bottom. It comes up. I'm going to go ahead and click open. And then I am going to select the Power BI desktop. You'll see at the top of the search bar, I just typed in Power BI so that you can find that. And I want the Power BI desktop. There's nothing special you need to do to install it. So please feel free to do so. Once I have the Power BI desktop, I can start modeling and visualizing my data. We can use multiple data sources, anything from Microsoft Excel to a web page to full-on Oracle. Power BI will ingest data from pretty much anywhere. We can do intuitive graphic-rich reports. And today, just for our demonstration, we're going to use some sample data from Microsoft. If you ever visit any of Microsoft's tutorials, you'll probably see Kevin's Cookie Company, because that some sample data that's kind of published that they use in a lot of their examples. So we're just going to use their Cookie Company data for our examples today. And if you want to, you could just go to Google and type in Kevin's Cookie Company, and you'll be able to download all that stuff from Microsoft if you want. Or if you're feeling adventurous, feel free to use some real data. If you've got some spreadsheets you want to practice with, if you've got some other data sources you want to use, feel free to do that. Unless you're manipulating the data, you're not going to break anything by importing it and modeling it. And if you don't know what I mean by importing and modeling data, you will hear shortly. So don't worry about that. But for today's example, we're using this spreadsheet that Microsoft put together for us, and it's called Kevin's Cookie Company. And you'll see I've got a variety of columns there, nothing too crazy, right? Some simple sales data that's broken down by the country, the product, the number of units sold, revenue per cookie, costs, total revenue. So it reads kind of like a typical business P&L kind of report, right? So this is going to be part of our underlying data. And just for the heck of it, just because I think this is kind of a cool feature and I want you to see it, I'm going to incorporate the population information from the countries where the cookie company is operating. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage population data that's been published to the internet in Wikipedia. So if I go to Wikipedia, and to prove to you that there's no fancy shenanigans going on in the background here, you could see at the top of the screen, it really is just the Wikipedia article about the world countries and their population. So, and I'll show you how we can bring this in really nicely into Power BI and incorporate it with our data. So I'm going to go ahead and get my Power BI desktop fired up. When you fire it up for the first time, you get some great tutorials that you are able to view. They are included in our Microsoft subscription. All of the Microsoft training tools are available to you for free. So I always encourage people, if there's something specific you're looking to do, there's a good chance there's a Microsoft tutorial out there for it. Obviously, the IT department's always happy to help. But if you're adventurous and you want to venture into the world of data, feel free to take a look at the training programs that are available, because they are really good. So now I've got my Power BI desktop open, and I'm going to get my data sources. So the first thing I want to do is bring my data in. There's a couple different ways to do it, right? So there's like the cool, intuitive splash screen that's in the middle of the screen. I'm just going to show you how to do it from the navigation ribbon up at top. So if you look and see, I'm clicking on Get Data, and that brings down my options. And there's a lot there, right? There's Excel, there's Power BI data sets. So we're going to create a data set while we're doing this, so you can repurpose these data sets. SQL, analysis services, which is kind of SQL analysis services. You could do comma separated values, the internet, all kinds of places we could pull data from. We're going to keep it simple today. We're going to do an Excel workbook, which is our cookie company, Kevin's Cookie Company financials. So I'm going to select Kevin Cookie Company Financials, and I'm just going to click open. Down here, I'm just going to click open, and that's going to bring in the data. And what it's doing here, what you're seeing on my screen is it's bringing over 3 options. So it's saying you have financials, which is the workbook. And then within the workbook, we have 2 sheets, cookie sales and sheet 1. For our example today, we just want cookie sales, but if we wanted to, we can also select financials, and then you can custom tailor your data when you bring it in, and I'll show you how to do some of that. But we're going to pick cookie sales, and then we're going to we're going to model the data. And let me go back real quick. So the nice thing about Power BI, the thing I like about it, and especially as someone who's written software, Power BI allows me to make data manipulations to the underlying data during the upload process. So I don't have to deal with maybe some glitches into data or some malformed fields or anything like that. I can correct those on the fly prior to import, and it'll save me some time down the road if I run into problems with my reports. So what I'm going to do is I want to tailor this a little bit. So in our fictitious example, we're going to say that this company stopped making fortune cookies. Sales weren't so great. They don't make fortune cookies anymore. So for this example, I'm going to exclude fortune cookies from my data set. The cookie company sales data sometimes has decimal units and the units sold, and that's caused by complexities in how the data is extracted, and it has to do with division and fractions. But when I'm modeling my reports, I want that data clean. So I'm going to show you how on import, I'm going to clean that, bringing it in, so I don't have to deal with that after the fact. And then we're just going to do, just for the purposes of demonstration, I just want to change the column month name to just say month. And the reason why is it makes the output for my report a little bit cleaner, and it's a little less work I have to do after I'm done building my report. So if we look at what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back and let me show you here. So here, I'm going to use the transform button when I bring the data in. So if you look at my screen, you'll see that I've put an arrow there by the transform data button. So I've gone back. So I'm at the point where I've imported my data. I'm selecting cookie sales. And instead of just going to load, I want to make some edits. So I'm going to go ahead and click on transform data. And that's going to give me the option to make changes using the Power Query Editor. And don't be scared right away, right? Because the Power Query Editor sounds complex, and but it's really not, and I'll show you why. So here you see I have the Query Editor open, and on the left I have my financials, workbook, and cookie sales that I'm working with. And there's a couple different things going on here. I don't want you to be, unless you're comfortable writing queries. Let's say you're an Excel guru and you love functions and you're not intimidated by them, and you like that that text editor kind of on the fly query editing. Feel free to have at it. I'm gonna steer away from it for the purposes of this demonstration, so I can just show you how to use the GUI effectively. So in this particular case, remember we said we want to eliminate fortune cookie. So if I select product code from the table, and you'll see it looks kind of like Excel, right? It looks like a lot like the Excel spreadsheet. And you'll see a lot of the features are very similar to Excel. So it kind of gives it that familiar flavor for you. But if I click on product, I have the option to filter that. So I'm going to take out fortune cookie, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to uncheck fortune cookie. And the next thing, remember we said I have some decimal problems with data in my units sold. So I can go in and change the data type just like I can in Excel. It's a little bit different, looks a little bit different. I'm just going to right click and I'm going to go change type. and I'm going to select whole number. So what that will do is it will either round down or round up depending, right? So 4 or lower, it's going to round down. 5, it's going to round up. I'm going to change my data type. And remember, I didn't like the column month name. I just want it to be called month. So you'll see in my illustration, I've highlighted that. I right click and I click on rename. And you'll see the before and after there. So you see where it says month name. I click on rename and it changes it to month for me. Now, this is all being done during the import process. It helps smooth out the amount of effort you have to put into creating your visualizations. So when it comes time to create a visualization, whether I have month in my access in a graph, or let's say I have it in a pie chart or whatever, it says what I want going into the conversation. I don't need to change it later. So I want my data to be as clean as possible going in. So I'm going to fix that. And the other thing I want to show you, and I've kind of zoomed in here. So if we look at the right pane of my screen, you see this box that's called Applied Steps. And I've zoomed into it for you on the bottom right. I can undo anything that I've done while I'm working through this. So let's say I, change column name from, 2 month, and I want to change it back. I could just X out of that and change it. Or let's say you made some filtering mistakes, right? And you want to undo your filtering. All I need to do is drill into that applied steps, and I can X out filtered rows, and it'll undo those actions that I did. So it keeps a running log for you on that right-hand side of actions that you're doing. So if you want to undo something, you can do it fairly easily. Now I'm going to show you here, your query editor. So you'll see, and I put this up there as an illustration for you so that you can see the query editor text, which is located at the top of the screen, and the filtered row that you're using the intuitive, user-friendly interface, right? So you'll see where that matches. So I can use either or. Like if I wanted to change fortune cookie to oatmeal, I could just type over fortune cookie up at the top and change it to oatmeal, as long as it matches the values that are in the data set. Or I can use my right click, change my feature, and add that filter for fortune cookie. Just an example to illustrate the various options you have on making some of these edits on the fly. So one thing I talked about at the beginning of the presentation was I want to steal some data from the internet. And it's handy, right? So even here at the Commerce Authority, even here at the Office of Economic Opportunity, we publish data to our websites. Did you know you can use the published data on the website, bring it into Power BI, and use it to create visualizations? It's a handy tool. So I'm saying, what about my country population data in this case? Well, all right, so where is it? It is on the internet. Remember, it's a Wikipedia article. So what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to go up and I'm going to go back to my data. I'm going to click on new source. When I bring down new source, web is an option. All I'm going to do is drop in the URL to where that data is, the Wikipedia link. Now watch how cool this is, right? We'll come back to that in a second. It brings that data in. Not only does it bring that data in, it'll bring in any other data tables that are on that web page. So now I can just select which one I want. In this particular case, it's called Sovereign States and Dependencies by Population. That's the data table I want. Let's go back to my previous slide here. What were we talking about? Okay, so this is a little caveat. If you're accessing secure data, the first time you go through this feature and you add the link, it may ask for credentials. So if it's a secure data source, you'll be prompted for credentials. And if you're going into that environment, I am operating on the assumption that someone has already given you credentials and you know where you're going. For the most part, anything that's available on the public internet, you're not going to need credentials for. So I kind of skipped over it because for the purposes of this example, we don't need credentials. If we had secure data, let's say, for example, we wanted to connect directly up to a SQL instance, or we wanted to connect up directly to an Oracle instance or something that's secure, that's where we would provide our credentials that say, hey, you can get this data. So I'm bringing in sovereign states and dependencies by population from Wikipedia. It puts it all in a nice table for me. And I want to model the data. So when I say model, it essentially means I want to put it into a more usable format to simplify my reporting going down the road. So in this particular case, I want to save some time. All I really want is the country name and the population. So let's clean it up a little bit, right? I want to make the name of the data set something a little more intuitive for me so that at a glance I understand what I'm looking at. I really don't care about what percentage of the population the country makes up for. I got a typo there. I'll fix that. I don't care about the date. I don't care about where it came from. I don't care about the population ranking. Really, all I want is the country name and the population, because that's what I'm going to put into my output. So I'm going to go through the process of doing that. So the first thing I'm going to do is rename that really long sovereign states by country population name. And I'm just going to call it country populations. So what you see on the screen is the before and after, right? So I'm going to right click on the name of the table I want to change. And I'm just going to do a rename. And I'm just going to change it to country populations. And then you'll see on the right, after I do the rename and hit enter, it changes it to country populations, a little more intuitive for me. Next thing I want to do is I want to get rid of all of the stuff that I don't need, right? So we talked about, I don't care about the rank. I don't care about what percentage of the population it is. I don't care about the date or what its official source is. For this demonstration, I'm going to clean all that up. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to remove it by column, and I'm going to end up with the country and the population. Now, I can further model this down. And you might say to me, you might be like, Chester, why do I want to model it here? Why don't I want to wait until I start the report? And if I know what I want going in, I want to make my data set as simple and as clean as possible because it means less work later. So for purposes of this, our fictitious company only operates in 5 countries: the United States, Canada, France, Germany, and Mexico. So I can go in and I can filter that column just like I did for Fortune Cookie. So I can do this a similar thing and I can go in and just pick the filters that I want, right? Or let's say I'm making a report for my company and this is a particular region and I'm going to produce regional reports. So I might pick one for North America. I might make one for South America. I might make one for Asia and Europe. So I can model the data ahead of time by selecting the countries that I want in my visualization going into the conversation. The other thing I can do if I wanted to is I can make minor corrections, right? So imagine the frustration. We've gone through, we've imported this data. I've got it from Wikipedia, or I've pulled it down from our website or from wherever it came from, and Canada's spelled wrong. Or there's a typo in there. Maybe there's, a question mark or some weird characters or whatever. I can clean the data up at this point if I want to, which is super handy for me. So all I need to do is right click on what I want to clean up and click on replace values, and I could change those on the fly. Another handy tool. The next thing I'm going to do, and I call it a join, because in the database world, we're creating a join. In everyday people speak, we're connecting the tables. So keeping true to form, it is technically a join. We're creating what's called a inner join on the two tables based on a primary key. For our purposes, let's just say we're connecting the tables with a common field, something that the two tables have in common. In this particular case, what the two tables have in common is the country name. So what I do is I highlight on the left navigation bar, I highlight cookie sales. And then if you look at my ribbon up at the top, I have a feature that's called Merge Queries. I'm going to click on Merge Queries, and it opens up the Merge dialog box. What it's saying here in English is, I've picked cookie sales. I want to merge it with something else. So I select cookie sales, merge queries, and now Power BI is saying, what do you want to merge it with? That's where I pick from my dropdown country populations. Why is country populations there? I added it to my data set. So if you remember what we did, we brought in an Excel spreadsheet, then we brought in data from the internet. Now we're going to merge them together. The one key that they have, the one thing we can use to merge them together is country populations. In some places, that might be an employee ID number. In some places, that could be a region code or an office code or a product code or whatever it is. You want to pick the thing that you can use to bring the data together. In this case, it's the country. So we're going to use country and country dependency fields. So country in our sales table and country dependency in our Wikipedia table, and we indicate that they are the keys to merge on because we're going to highlight them. So while I have that box open, I'm going to pick country from cookie sales and then country dependency from country populations. And then that will create a join. Now you see here where it says left outer join. That's the default. I could change it to inner join. I could leave it outer join. I don't want to get too technical into what joins mean, but at a high level, if I say I want a left outer join, what that means is give me all of the values from my first table, whether or not they have a relationship in the second table that I'm joining. So that's where when you start talking about data modeling, understanding queries and things become a little more complicated. Because if I did an inner join, I wouldn't get things that didn't match. It's a whole nother conversation, probably for a more advanced conversation on data analytics and how data merges together. But for this demonstration, we're just going to go with the default because it's going to give us what we want. And if you wanted to, there's even this feature down at the bottom called fuzzy matching. So let's say you have things that don't quite match and you want Microsoft to make a best guess, you can use that functionality and Microsoft will make a best guess determination as to the things that match. It's a pretty cool tool. And if you've done work in databases, you're probably thinking to yourself, gosh, I would have loved, a fuzzy logic matching option, when I was trying to join, a dozen different SQL tables together or whatever it might have been at the time. So the privacy level prompt, and when you're merging data, this is a super complex conversation, but here's what it means in essence, right? I'm pulling out data. In this case, I'm pulling data from the web. But I could be pulling data from maybe an ACA SharePoint site or a confidential place within the ACA. And it's going to give you this privacy level prompt because it wants you to know that, hey, you could be inadvertently taking confidential data and dropping it into a report that other people are going to be able to see. So you can set privacy levels on this data. Again, this is an overview. I want to keep it simple, get your feet wet with it. Generally speaking, if we're working within the ACA, we don't really care a whole lot if someone from one department sees data or vice versa. Yeah, we care. Is it catastrophic if if someone sees a sales forecast or something from a company? Probably not. If things are going to leave the building, really you need to understand what you're doing when you merge data, especially into publicly available data sets. So again, you get stuck, you're not sure, please ask. So in this particular case, I'm just going to ignore privacy labels, or I'm sorry, levels, because I know where the data came from. The cookie sales are not secret. They're readily available. The country populations are not a secret. They're readily available. I'm just going to merge them together into a comprehensive report. I don't really care about the privacy in this particular case. Verify the expecting matching value. So after clicking Safe, you're going to be presented with rows that were matched. And what I mean by verify the expecting matching value is this. So you'll see on the bottom of this screen where it says the selection matches 607 of 607 from the first table. This would be interesting to me if I was expecting these numbers to match and they didn't. So let's say the selection matched 600 of 607 rows from the first table. And you go, Chester, why is that interesting? Tell me. The reason why it's interesting is I have 7 rows of data from my first table that have a country code or a country name that doesn't exist in the country table that I brought in from the web. So maybe I have erroneous data. Maybe I have a spelling error. Maybe I have sales from a country that, for whatever reason, were not part of that data table that I took down from Wikipedia. So always make sure that your match meets your expectation. If it doesn't, it's indicative of some sort of underlying data error that you're going to want to go back and look for. So now I say, okay, I'm good with that. It shows me my merge queries. You see country populations there. It's indicating table. All I need to do is indicate the field that I want to throw in there. So I want population, and then it'll throw that in there. So now I've taken my sales from my fictitious cookie company, brought them in from an Excel spreadsheet. I linked in populations of countries from the internet. They didn't need to do anything with that other than provide the hyperlink to it, clean it up just a tad. And now I have a comprehensive table that brings that information together for me. So imagine the power of this as we add more data. Imagine it from the standpoint of a cookie company. Maybe now I can add some customer demographics. Maybe I can buy some consumer marketing data from major grocery stores like Fry's and or Kroger, and get shopping cart data and potentially match my sales up to individuals. Think about how powerful this tool becomes the more data you have and the more you can relate it. And quite honestly, this type of work, this was really kind of 5, 6, 7 years ago. This was work really deserved for a database administrator. Like there really wasn't a simple tool available for general use on merging and visualizing data. So that's where Power BI becomes really cool in my mind, is it really enables you to start working with your data in some pretty intuitive ways. So now that I'm happy with that data, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Close and Apply at the top left. So right there, I'm going to click Close and Apply. And that's going to close the Power Query Editor, and then it's going to take me to the home page of Power BI. And what this is called in Power BI is called the canvas. It's essentially just a blank slate for you to build your visuals. So what I want to do in the next few minutes, because I know we're already 40 minutes in almost, gosh, let's build some visuals. So let's see what this data looks like here. So the first thing I'm going to do is, and give you some perspective. So you'll see on my screen on the far right, I have some columns. I have filters, visualizations, and data. So let's kind of go through those, right? So data, if I expand that, that shows my underlying data tables and their fields. If I go over to visualizations, that looks like something we would see in Excel, right? Like a maybe like a graph builder, something like that. These are my visualizations. I'll show you how we use them in a second here. And my views are on the left side of my page. Let's see if we can go back one. So this here, if my cursor isn't going too fast and you can see it, I'm on the far left. Those are my visuals, and we'll take a look at those here too. So if I toggle through my visuals here, right? So the canvas we talked about, that's the report view. That's what my report's going to look like. My data view looks kind of like Excel or maybe like an Access data table or something like that. That's my data. And then my model view. This is where, I've been throwing out the word modeling throughout the training today. This is where that's kind of visualized. So I could see where those joins come into play in the relationship. And we'll see it's a one-to-many relationship on my left join. Again, data speak, you don't need to worry about it. Just focus on the usability of the tools. So let's build a report, and we're going to use the navigation bar on the left, and we're going to go back to our report canvas or our report view. And I'm going to bring some visualizations out. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's give it a title, right? I'm going to click on the text box. And this is where I think it kind of feels like PowerPoint. So you're going to click on text box, and then you get to drop that and scale it onto your report, right? So I'm going to call this Chester's Super Amazing Sample Report. And I can do fun things like change the font and the font size and center it and things like that. And then we'll add some data. So this is kind of a typical P&L kind of report kind of thing. So let's do something simple. We'll do profit by date. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the data pane on the right, and I'm going to choose those two fields, right? So those are fields in my data set. I have a field called date. I have a field called profit. I'm going to select those. And then you'll see I have an arrow that points to the left. That defines what my report's going to look like. That kind of it's what my visualization is going to look like. So if you don't change anything here, Microsoft will do a best guess. And in this case, it breaks it out by month for me. But I could change that, right? So if you look at that visualization option, I could change it to year. I could change it to quarter. Right now it's set to month. So it's showing me the sum of profit by month. Let's change that date so it's date hierarchy. From right now, it's date hierarchy. Now, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time explaining the vernacular here, but date hierarchy means it gives you the ability to drill in, right? So what that means is if I leave this set to date hierarchy, I can click on a value here, and it's not one, right? I can expand that out a little bit, and you can see the numbers a little bit better. And I can drill down into those numbers by clicking into them and see detail. For purposes of this demonstration, though, I'm just going to change it to date. It's a little bit easier to work with. And then that'll, you see it's broken down here. My scale on the left is millions. And again, I could change all these values. I could change my X and my Y axes. I can further custom define them just like I can do in Excel. So if you're used to doing graphs in Excel, this is pretty intuitive for you. If you're not used to using graphs in Excel, this is not super hard to get accustomed to. Go in there, tinker around with it, change different views. You're not going to break anything by doing that. So I can also change my chart type. So if I want to change it to a line graph, because I like to see sales on a line graph. Super easy to do. You'll see how I have it marked on the right side under my visualizations. All I did was change my graph from a bar graph to a line graph. So here's my bar graph. That's this option. Number 4, the 4th column under visualizations is what's selected. And I just change it to row 2 of the 1st column, which is my line graph. So now I have a graph. And let's say I want to do something super cool, right? I have the countries. What if I want to visualize that on a map? That's a cool, powerful feature. Microsoft will do it for you. All I need to do is drag the map icon, visualization icon, over to my canvas. So it's underneath my visualizations pane. I just highlight it and I drag it over, and then I'm going to select country. So if we look at that now, it'll show me my sales by country on a map. This would be super interesting if, let's say, I had it by zip code, right? So now I can use that as maybe a tool to figure out where I want to put a new store. I could say, hey, look, I'm selling a lot of cookies to people who are buying from zip code 85, I don't know, 238, but they're shopping at a store that's 10 miles away. Maybe we need to put a store closer into that zip code. So what I think is funny, and some of you who've seen some Microsoft products over the day, Microsoft used to make a product that did this quite effectively, and they discontinued it, and it was called MapPoint. And it's kind of fun to see them bring back the mapping functionality through Power BI and make it simple and easy to use to map your data. So again, just like in Excel, we can manipulate this data and we could change the graphs, we could change the maps. So you really need to familiarize yourself with the options that are available in the product, because there are quite a few. And if I wanted to, I can go ahead and I can drag a nice table on there with some actual values. And all I'm doing in this example is, I know we're not doing it live, but all I'm doing is picking it from the visualization pane, and I'm left clicking and I'm dragging it over to my report canvas. And I'm picking on my right side what data I want in that visualization. If you come from an old school programming vernacular, it would be called a control, but we're going to call it a visualization. And you just specify what you want that to look like. So we can even fancy it up a little bit. We have templates. We have fun themes we can apply. We can color it up a little bit, similar to like we can do in PowerPoint. So that's where I draw some of those parallels for you. It's like applying a theme in PowerPoint. You can apply it to your presentations. So now that I have it, I'm going to publish it to Power BI. So I'm done. I've got my report. I've added a line graph. I've added sales by country on a map. And then I've added line level detail. And I want to publish this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm going to click on publish to Power BI. And then I have some options here. So because we're working in the ACA workspace, there are some existing Power BI workspaces that people have created them, and they work in those spaces. So there's one called ACA Scorecard Dashboard. There's one that's called Research. And within those are data sets and all kinds of other data. And you can even use that data into your own Power BI, assuming it's not secure. And if it's secure, remember we talked about earlier, you'd be asked for credentials. That's where you provide those credentials, et cetera, et cetera. But we can even use other people's published data and incorporate it into our data and further enhance it. And once I do, It's going to go ahead and publish it. In this particular case, I just published it to my workspace, so it's just for me. And you'll see that it created 2 data sets in a report. So what are my data sets? My first data set is my cookie sales. My second data set is my country name and population table. The nice thing is these data sets are here and I can repurpose them down the road if I wanted to. If I want to share this with others, one, I can make my workspace available. We'll pass on that for right now, just because you know, there's permissions and certain things that come into play when you're going to publish your workspace. So in this particular case, we're just going to share the report that I made in Power BI, and you'll see your tried and true friendly share button that you see in all your Office 365 space. And I'm just going to click on share, and I can send it to whoever I want. That is a super high level overview of visualizations in Power BI. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and we can go ahead and have some chit chat time. If anyone has any specific questions, I might not be able to answer all of them, but I will certainly try. Stop recording.